Thank you for being here at the 2023 Iowa Hunger Summit. My name's Abby Turner. I work for the World Food Prize Foundation. It's a pleasure to be opening up this session for you. Today, we're talking about benefits of adding an egg a day to a child feeding program in South Africa. So with that, each of our panelists are going to have a chance to speak, and then at the end, we're going to open it up for Q&A. So save those questions for the end. We'll have plenty of time to pick the brains of each of our panelists. With that, I'll pass it off to you all.
Thank you. My name is Bruce Dooyema, and I'm from Sioux Center, Iowa, and I had to drive school bus this morning before I could drive up here, and it's a 250-mile drive. I've been in the egg business 47 years. I made the mistake of asking my mom and dad when I was in 7th grade for 12 chickens, and they were overachievers and gave me 24 instead. And then that led on to a 60,000 bird chicken house in 8th grade, and then a dairy barn fire in 86 led to another chicken house, and then we started Center Fresh, and I turned 60 this year, so I feel like I left the 50 club into the 60s club. But anyway, my passion, we got invited in 2009 to go to Mozambique, Africa, which is just above South Africa, to visit these two brothers, Peter and Andrew Cunningham. And they wanted to start an egg-laying business, and we decided to partner with them. And I've been to Africa 28 times, and there's nothing more than I love better than to promote eggs wherever I can, and to help undernourished populations and kids, even in our hometown. I'm the chairman of the Iowa Egg Council here in Iowa. I'm on the International Egg Foundation board, and I'm on the World Poultry Foundation board, which gets me into a lot of different countries and to see a lot of different egg projects. And through my travels, I've worked with Tom for the last 29 years with Hy-Line. Dr. Blessman and the Blessman International group I've been working with probably for the past 4 or 5 years. And I got to visit their site in South Africa. It's a wonderful site. It's very well set up, very well managed, and they're feeding 60,000 kids. It's awesome what they're doing. I was in Honduras earlier this year, and a program that they're doing, it's called the 1,000-Day Program, and I introduced it to the Blessman Group, and they're excited about starting that. The Blessman Group has been feeding kids, the 5-year-olds to 12-year-olds, and the 1,000-Day Program starts with the pregnant mom through 3 years of life on the kid, giving a kid a one egg a day program. And the difference that's made in a family that I got to witness is incredible. And I'm going to close off by just sharing this story of, we met this family in Honduras. She's got 3 kids, husband and wife. Her first 2 pregnancies, her kids were born at 5 pounds. They didn't learn to walk till they were a year and a half old, and she said during her pregnancy she had no ambition, no energy to, for the 9 months while she was pregnant, right? Because she's got no protein in her diet. The third child that she's pregnant with, she was on the 1,000-Day Program, which is as soon as the medical clinic knows that they're pregnant, they give her and her whole family 1 egg a day during her pregnancy, and then after the kid's born, during the first 3 years of that kid's life. And she said she had all kinds of energy during her pregnancy, receiving that egg. Her child was born at 9 pounds of weight, and she was 9 months old and beginning to walk already. And the only difference is the egg. And then I saw chickens running around in the background, and I says, what are those chickens about? If you're on the 1,000-Day Program, why do you have chickens? Well, she says the egg has made so much difference in our lives that I want to supply our whole neighborhood with eggs once I'm kicked off of the 1,000-Day Program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom from Hy-Line.
Thank you, Bruce. It's a great pleasure to be here today here in the Iowa Hunger Summit.
As Bruce mentioned, my name is Tom Dixon. I work with Hy-Line International, which is based here in West Des Moines, Iowa, Dallas Center. And we're a primary breeder of egg-laying hens. It's a great pleasure to be here in this Iowa Hunger Summit. And as we're sitting here in the World Food Prize Hall, it's dedicated to Dr. Borlaug, we should remember another Iowan who dedicated his life work and his use of scientific discovery to feed the world. I'm talking about Dr. Henry Wallace. As I came in the room, I noticed, that looks an awful lot like him there on the right side. And I think I see his picture up in the upper right now as I sit here. So I guess you haven't forgotten about Dr. Wallace. And I think what Borlaug did, essentially Wallace did something very similar, maybe not on the same scale. That he was recognized with what's it called? They got the Nobel Food Prize. But Dr. Wallace did run for president at one time, and so he's a pretty famous guy as well. But Dr. Wallace was from Iowa, southwest Iowa, farm family, went to Iowa State University. I'm talking like this is during World War I in the early 20th century, early 1900s. His PhD work was working on hybridization of corn plants, and that was his PhD work. I mean, that time that's groundbreaking research. It was he was a pioneer in all that research and investigation. And he established Pioneer Hybrid, which now is Corteva, and the largest company in the world that does this kind of thing. And there's maybe a company that's not quite well as known is Hy-Line that I work for, was actually part of Pioneer, was sold off as a livestock branch, and we were owned by actually a German company. But Hy-Line was established by Dr. Wallace in 1936, so we're almost 90 years in these efforts. And we do the same thing with hybrid laying hens. So at that time, hybridization was a new thing. He established a company from a geneticist running it and produced the first commercial hybrid layers in the world. And now 90 years later, Hy-Line is continuing in that business and really working to feed the world with egg protein. And today, Hy-Line is the largest primary breeder of egg-laying hens. So again, Dr. Wallace's vision was to feed the world through genetic research. He wanted to improve yields. Looking ahead, as we look ahead in the world, he saw the growing population. He had to improve yields, and that was what he dedicated his life to doing. And today, we're continuing his work as Hy-Line. We're providing some 2 billion laying hens worldwide right now. We're from our genetics, which is some 35% of all the egg-laying hens in the world, and it all starts right here in Dallas Center, Iowa, is where it all started, in more than 120 countries around the world. And Hy-Line produces the most efficient, productive hens, egg-laying hens in the world. And we have a team of geneticists investing tens of millions of dollars every year to make them more productive and more efficient, to reach more egg protein to more people, which is really the definition of sustainability. That's what we're dedicated to. You talk about the egg is really a miracle food. Eggs are affordable. You can walk into Hy-Vee with $1. Well, they weren't so affordable maybe a year ago, but right now the prices come down a lot. But you can go in with essentially $1 or a little bit more, and you can walk out with a dozen eggs. And just 2 eggs will contain 6 grams of protein, contain all 9 of the essential amino acids. They're nutrient dense. It's high in nutrients, low in calories. Has choline as Bruce was talking about, this 1,000 days, and nursing mothers and developing brains need choline, and eggs are rich in choline. It's part of that helping development of brain, nerves, and tissue, and reduces macular degeneration, which is the most common form of blindness. It's good for your muscles. Eggs always got the bad rap that they're high in cholesterol, and now after all this study, they find out, well, actually it's high in good cholesterol. You need cholesterol to live, and it's high in the good cholesterol. And studies even show now higher rates of egg consumption are related to lower rates of heart disease and lower rates of stroke. So we really see that the egg is a great possibility to help reduce malnourishment around the world, and is really inexpensive as well. If you look at Africa, it's home to 1.3 billion people. It's going to be almost 3 billion people in the next 40 years. And you look at the African continent, the data I've seen, they eat about 1 egg a week. You compare that to the USA, Europe, these other places, we eat about 6 eggs a week, so about 5 to 6 times more egg protein than they do in Africa. So really increasing egg consumption is something as part of Hy-Line and working with other egg production companies around the world. Would like to see more
increase in egg consumption to feed all those people and bring all those health benefits to more people around the world. So with that in mind, as Hy-Line was looking at our sustainability efforts, I thought, well, we want to do a very tangible project or effort to show these egg benefits. We can talk a lot about it and say it does all these great things, which are true, and cite studies, but I said we need to do actually something tangible. We're giving eggs to people that need them. So I just kind of called Jim out of the blue. I've known him for a long time and about his efforts and his work and supported it, and called him up and said, hey, we got an idea. You guys are feeding all these kids in Africa. You're giving these meals from the heartland. Why don't you add some egg protein to it? And Jim jumped on it and has been just awesome support of this whole thing. And we've been feeding at least one egg a day to all his local kids there since about March up until now. And Hy-Line, we delivered the 1,200 Hy-Line silver brown pullets ready to lay from our South African subsidiary, and just been doing great. And his team is actually doing a great job managing. And then Bruce visited a few weeks ago and gave him some good pointers, and they're just doing fantastic, producing some 1,000 eggs a day. And so now those kids are getting one egg every day. And as Jim will talk in more detail, and Jeffrey, about the study, we're reaching this kind of cohort of kids that really get almost zero support, just government support. They're in a really difficult situation malnourished-wise, and now those kids are just starting to get 2 eggs a day. And we're going to chart the health benefits of these 2 eggs a day to this group, and ideally publish the results, have all that information, and then share that with the industry, because there's so many people talking about all these ideas for doing things, but we think organized egg industry with modern laying hens and managed well is the most effective way to feed a country the size of South Africa or reach the soon-to-be 2.8 billion people on the continent. So it's great to be here from Iowa as a Iowa company working with a Iowa egg producer and an Iowa physician coming all together, and University of Iowa student all coming together to try to affect what's going on in South Africa with feeding kids with egg protein. And we hope through all this work we'll be able to get more and more support and scale it up and be able to reach more and more kids with this good news. So that's just as Hy-Line, we're glad to be part of this work, and we really thank Dr. Blessman and all his team for the tremendous work they're doing there, and we're glad to be side by side with him and supporting these efforts. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. My name is Jim Blessman. I'm a physician, practiced medicine in this community for 30 years, and then retired from that and became a full-time missionary in 2001. And groups like this and what I hear today makes me really proud to be an Iowan. It's just such joy to sit around and see what the Midwest is doing, this state is doing, and I think we all should be proud of our roots and where we come from. Just want to spend a little time sharing with you about who we are. My wife and I are missionaries in the country of South Africa. We've been there for about 22 years now, and we focus primarily on serving impoverished children there. And since we're at the Iowa Hunger Summit, we'll focus today on our nutritional program primarily. But there are many other things that our ministry is involved with doing. Since I was a physician, we started out doing medical work there, and then we evolved to doing eye tests and giving out glasses and providing kids with free shoes and women with menstrual hygiene products. We love to host people on short-term service trips or mission trips, and we've had over 1,200 people come on 2-week short-term mission trips. And most of those people were from Iowa. We do have a few people from all around the country and occasionally Canada and even Europe, but most of our visitors are from Iowa, and we really appreciate hosting guests on our campus in South Africa. We are blessed with incredible resources. We have 3 beautiful campuses, or 3 sites to our work there. One, we built a lodge where we host mission teams. That's where our business office is. We have about 40 employees in South Africa. As I'm getting older, it's important that my son and his wife are there taking over the day-to-day operations. I've been in Iowa all summer. It's the longest I've been out of Africa for 20 years, and I've enjoyed being here in Iowa this summer. But usually my wife and I spend a little over half our time in the country of South Africa. I've been there even more than Bruce. I do 3 trips a year for 22 years, and so I got my million-mile certificate a few years ago. Lots of airtime, but we love the work we're doing in the country of South Africa. We also love working with Iowans, and I want to continue the theme that I've been hearing all day of what Iowa is doing to help people all around the world, and especially help feed the world. But we have a number of churches in Iowa. We probably have 40 churches in Iowa that support us. There's probably 200 churches in Africa that work with us, primarily as volunteers, and a little bit of financial support from our African brothers and sisters. Iowa companies that have been an integral part of what we do. Hy-Vee, all of you know Hy-Vee. They came to us, or we actually went to them. We knock on a lot of doors. Missionaries are always asking for funds, and it was one of the terrible jobs when I first started as a missionary, and now I love it because it causes me to meet the most wonderful people. But I went to Hy-Vee several years ago, and I was asking for funds to help drill wells in Africa. And a good friend of mine now, Gary Goodall, was managing their community funds. And he said, Doc, I've given a lot of money and I've never seen my first cup of water. And I said, well, give us a chance. And 3 months later, I sent him a video of our son drinking a cup of water. And since then, we've drilled about 50 wells with Hy-Vee. They've also donated, I would say, a few $1 million to Meals from the Heartland over the years. And that's where we get a lot of food that we feed African children. We've been feeding children for about 14, 15 years now. We were working with Meals from the Heartland the first year they started working, and they've been one of our major partners. I actually was personally responsible for connecting Meals from the Heartland and Convoy of Hope. Convoy of Hope is a disaster relief company similar to the Red Cross, but a very strong Christian company. And Meals from the Heartland gathers food together. They gather volunteers. I bet most people in this room have packaged the meals with Meals from the Heartland, and Convoy of Hope ships those meals over to us. So we get about $1.5 million worth of food from Meals from the Heartland every year. That's 6 million meals, and let me tell you, it's a lot of food. And if you don't believe me, help me unload a container of food. We hire about 6 or 8 strong, young African men and give them all the pizza they can eat and a little bit of money, and about 5-6 hours of hard labor, and we have our container of 287,000 meals unloaded. We get 21 of those containers every year, and we ship them all over southern Africa, not just to our own little location where we live. We have a beautiful home there. We also have a small farm, but we have 12 hubs scattered around southern Africa, and each hub gets a container about every 8 months, depending on how many children they feed. And that's how we feed 60,000 kids. And we've been doing that for many, many years now. And at first, when my wife and I were missionaries, we thought when we got older and we finally retired, we'd just shut the doors and be done. But you start feeding all those kids, you can't do that. And so we started figuring out, how do we sustain this and how do we keep this going? And, it's very inefficient to ship food from Iowa, especially Iowa rice. I don't know where in the world we get that. But we ship food from Meals from the Heartland to Africa to feed African kids. And that just seems incredibly inefficient and maybe even wasteful. But it's worked for 15 years. It looks like it's going to work for the next generation. And it comes to us so easily, and it's feeding literally thousands of children every day. For us to count a child, we have to feed them 3 to 5 days a week. And most of those kids get a meal 5 days a week. And we also make sure they get at least 450 calories with each meal. We measure in depth everything we do. My nephew works at Amazon. He's much younger than I. And he said, Jim, if you don't measure it, you're not doing it. So we started measuring almost everything we do and documenting what we're doing. And when Tom came to me a year and a half ago and said, we want to help you feed kids in Africa with eggs, we didn't want to just take some eggs to start feeding kids. We wanted to do a scientific study that would document, is this a good idea? And so we put together a research project with University of Iowa Medical School. We have an MOU with them, and they send students over. And instead of just handing out the eggs and feeding kids with eggs, we decided to do a scientific study, measure the kids' height and weight and their attendance and their performance in our program, feed them an egg a day, and see if there's a difference. Well, the first go-around, we'd been feeding those kids quite well for the last 15 years. We didn't expect much difference, but we learned how to do a study, and that was important. We want to do everything we do with excellence. The next study, Jeff will talk a lot more about, but like Tom was saying, we went to a school where the children are surviving just on the government school feeding program, and it's embarrassing. It's solely inadequate. There's stunted kids there. They're just malnourished. And so we're starting to feed those kids 2 eggs a day, and we're right now in the process of doing that and measuring it, and Jeff will say a lot more about that. But anyway, those are some of the things we're doing. Other Iowa companies, I hate to mention them because I'll leave somebody out that's really important, and that's embarrassing. But Musco Lighting, a couple of years ago, we went to them hoping they'd give us a little bit of money for some soccer balls and sports uniforms, and they donated $250,000 worth of LED sports lights. And we put them in a small African village that doesn't even have street lights. And you can imagine what that brings to a community. Over the lunch hour, we just heard what a grocery store does for a community. You had a beautiful sports program for the kids, you had a Christian component to it, and it just changes lives for generations. And so, again, we thank Iowa for all your contributions. That beautiful sports field brought Fellowship of Christian Athletes. They got interested in what we're doing. So we're now the sole provider or the main provider of FCA services for the country of South Africa. And a little bit of what we hope to do next in the area of nutrition. Like Tom was saying, my vision is to feed 100,000 kids an egg a day. Right now we're feeding 60,000, and most of those 60,000 aren't getting an egg a day. 200 children in our study were getting an egg a day, and then the second phase, 70 children. And as we measure these results and we publish, at least internally, if we can publish in a quality scientific journal, that will help even more. We can bring in money to buy 100,000 eggs a day to feed 100,000 kids. That's where we hope we're headed. I'm going back next month, and I hope to work with some clinics and a hospital there and start feeding pregnant ladies the 1,000-day program that Bruce introduced me to. We're going to copy that. It's fair to copy things when you're a missionary. And we even are in communication with the group that he introduced me to. And we'll start feeding pregnant ladies an egg a day and their babies for the first 1,000 days. And again, measure the results. We won't feed thousands of kids. We'll probably pick a couple hundred and feed them and see what that does. And I know it's going to be positive. It's just common sense. And sometimes common sense is in very short supply, but it's common sense. You add good quality protein, it'll benefit them. We've been getting meals from the Heartland Meals for years. The protein in that is soy. It's good protein, but I'm in discussion with them now to see if I can encourage them to add egg protein or maybe even switch to egg protein from soy. So we'll see what the future of that is, but I'm excited to see where we're going with all this. I'd like to end and just give you a little note about why we do what we do. We've talked a lot about who we are and what we do, but I think the important thing is why. Why are we doing all this? And for my wife and I, it's an absolute spiritual thing. It's a calling from God. And I can promise you, living in Africa, I love it, and it's a very positive, joyous thing, but there are many, many times I would have given up and stopped. That had not been a true calling from God. And here we are 22 years later. Our son and his wife are picking up the reins, and the future looks incredibly bright. And so proud to be part of this wonderful state and have support like all of you guys. And so thank you so much.
It's never a good idea to follow him. By way of introduction, my name is Jeffrey Goddard. I am at the University of Iowa Carver College of Medicine. I have a bit of an extensive research background in biotechnology, organizational psychology, community health, and a few other areas. I have a bit of a bias toward data. I also have a bias toward functional data. One of the biggest struggles I've had at dealing with academics at the university is, especially younger people, come in very excited to share their research and show this the gap in the research that they've been able to close with their new data, and it's almost common sense information. It's stuff that does very little except give something for somebody's resume. And I always ask the same question, well, so what? So now what are you going to do with it? And they said, well, we're going to give it to somebody else, and then we're going to go run a new study. And one of the reasons that I was very excited to be involved with Dr. Blessman and Blessman International and these wonderful gentlemen is an opportunity not only to do research, but to do research that would be implemented, that would have an effect. I'm going to get a little emotional, I apologize. I'm not from Iowa, but Norman Borlaug is one of my heroes. As I said, most of my research is in biotechnology, and he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He could have won it in biology, he could have won it in chemistry, he won it in peace, because we recognize as a planet that feeding people solves conflict. Feeding people it not only allows people to survive, it allows people to thrive. That's a beautiful legacy for the state of Iowa. So, as representatives from the state of Iowa, thank you. A little personal. I grew up in Appalachia for a good chunk of my childhood, and the rest in Guatemala. And I often went to school in the summers, mostly because that's where we would eat. That's where our meals were coming from. So to now be able to be a part of a program that is specifically focused on making sure that children are getting the food that they need, it's a bit personal for me. I have letters after my name and an extensive CV only because I was able to live in a place where I was able to get access to food. Now I get to kind of nerd out about the benefits of that. For example, we were talking about the importance of cholesterol. This is just a fun fact to keep you guys excited. Every single cell in your body needs cholesterol to survive. And so if you have a child that is growing and replicating their cells at an enormous rate, they need a lot of cholesterol. And so things like eggs help a lot. And that's the kind of details that I get excited about. My family laughs at me, but anyway, so this study. So I started talking to Dr. Blessman last fall about what it is that he does, and I was enamored with the idea of making an actual impact on the community, not just studying for the sake of studying and increasing a resume or putting a feather in my cap, but studying for the express intent of making a difference, of applying the data in a way that helps. But of course you need data that helps. Doing projects just because they make you feel good isn't the worst thing in the world, but we need to get to a point where we're data driven, that we're doing what is most effective, not just what makes us feel good. And so when we started talking about how we were going to design the project, I was very fortunate that Doc gave me quite a bit of autonomy on the structure of the research. So as we talked about, we are working with children in primary school, which is ages 5 to 12. So it's a little bit older than the normal age range that we would want to capture some of the benefits from nutritional intervention. That's not to say that there isn't intervention, or there isn't data to back up the idea that this could work. So we leaned on that data and we tried to create a way to measure what those benefits might be. Obviously, we're measuring the children anthropometric data, so we're looking at BMI, we're looking at growth rates, we're tracking this over time, we're comparing them not only to themselves, but to a control group. So we'll see how have they changed over the last 6 months compared to the 6 months before that. How have they changed compared to a group that isn't getting these benefits? These, I guess I don't need to get into the weeds on what all of these ideas are called, but this is to make sure that we can accurately attribute the benefit to the eggs that we're offering these children, so that when we take it to the community, both in South Africa and the academic community abroad, we can say we are confident in these results, and this is something that we can now go forth and implement successfully. And it's very scalable, which is obviously what you want any intervention program to be. We are also tracking their academic performance. I know one of the reasons I thought to add this for myself is because I know that the reason that my siblings and I went to school so often was in large part not because it was required of us. I mean, it was, but there was food there. That was breakfast. That was lunch. And often that was the only meals that we got. So I wanted to see if maybe by adding this additional caloric supplement, if we could increase attendance rates in the schools, as well as academic performance. We're also tracking behavior. I am in constant communication, thank heavens for the internet, with the principal and the instructors at the school to be able to see if there's any performance differences and how the children are interacting at school. Sometimes we get a little rowdy when we get too many calories, and that's a good thing for a kid, to have that kind of energy. And so it's we're in the preliminary stages. A lot of what we've done so far is I had the opportunity to standardize the approach on how we're doing the measuring, how we are tracking the data, helping Doc's organization in South Africa standardize their methodology, and then staying in contact with them as we continue with the study. We've done the Del Kramer facility, which is about 200 kids, and I have tracked them over the last maybe 6 months or so with this intervention. We have now another pilot school. I don't speak Afrikaans, can't say the name out loud, I'm sorry. But the principal, every time they get a delivery, sends me about 13 or so images of the kids just excited to be eating, which is exciting for me. And we will be tracking this data, and then I will do the data analysis. Hopefully about February, we'll be able to start that project. It has been a bit of a challenge working with the bureaucracy of the Department of Education in South Africa, as well as other academic organizations there. But it is a beautiful thing to see all these organizations coming together. There are a lot of problems in the world that are solved through corporations doing good in the world, private charities doing good in the world, and public officials coming together to do good in the world. And I'm excited to be a part of a project that is bringing all of these people together for one common cause, which is making sure that these children are not going hungry. I guess I wanted to end, this kind of explains the study, I wanted to end by saying that it is an exciting time to be alive and to be working on this work, and it is an exciting time to be in a room like this full of people that are interested in this work. We now produce about 1.5 times the amount of food that we need to feed the entire planet. So we are a post-scarcity society that has not yet realized that we are a post-scarcity society. And at this point, it is just getting it into the right hands. And these kids are the right hands. And so we're excited to be doing that. So thank you.
We got about 10 minutes left, so let's open it up for some questions.
Yeah, 2 questions. Is it Mike from Hy-Line?
Tom?
And then 2 questions for the researcher. Quick questions, all of them. When you say you increase productivity, are you shortening the time between production of an egg? And then the second question for you is, can you do GMO to add vitamins for specific populations that are short on vitamins? And then for the researcher, what's your control and what do you do about informed consent?
Okay, so I'll answer the first 2 questions. I guess the second one was the GMO research, and that's a really interesting question that you asked. Hy-Line International, we do not do any GMO research, and we've kind of been sworn not to do that, and it's like the policy because of all the associated problems or concerns around the world of having a Franken chicken or things like that, and so we do not. And maybe even we had an interesting conversation the other day that there's could be some interesting things you could do with GMO, and there's a little bit kind of pushback internally saying, why can't we at least study some of these things? So I mean, that we're getting almost to the point, just with genetic research, you're hitting that top level because we aren't short. And the other question is, how are we increasing productivity? Is it by shortening the production process? We're not. No, it still takes 23 hours or so to produce an egg. So what we're doing is we're breeding for hens within a family. We're looking for the hens that don't need as many rests. So when you get fewer rest days. So in theory, if you can if a chicken takes 22 hours to produce an egg, in theory you could produce an egg every single day. What happens is the chickens take a rest. You get patterns, they're called clutches. You'll get like 3 eggs and then a rest and then 3 eggs, and they do these different clutches. So what the researchers do, they're looking for the hens that don't rest and they're able to persist, called persistency of lay. And they stay at that very high rate with few rests, and you get a population of animals, of birds that do that. So they stay as close to 1 egg per day as possible. And then now it's really a marathon to see how far out you can keep them doing that, because you have to have eggshell quality. Then you get less efficient, you get further out, and just you wear out also too. So you have to build a really good hen that just very persists well and will stay at a high rate of lay. So that's what we do genetically, and from our researchers, is to look for birds that go out further at a high rate of lay, disease resistance, and all that. So that's how we do on the egg production side.
Some questions to you.
Yeah, of course. Real quick, just we've come a long way with chickens. You know, our ancestors were looking at a bird that laid an egg once or twice a month, and the fact that we're able to get so much productivity out of these birds is a testament to human ingenuity. So as far as, let's make sure I'm answering the right questions. The first one was
Informed consent.
the control. So we'll go for the control first. So we're comparing it to another primary school in the region that is only receiving food from the government, the subsidies that they're supposed to receive. So, and the other control is they themselves. So we're doing both a non-randomized control trial as well as a pre-test, post-test trial, comparing them both to themselves and to the other school.
And then what are you doing for informed consent?
Yeah, so we have an official document. So with the University of Iowa and then the University of Venda in South Africa, both have standardized informed consent documents that we use. And then a lot of the population that we're working with struggle with literacy, especially English literacy. Their main language is Sepedi in this region in South Africa. So we worked with the elementary schools, predominantly the principals and the teachers, to be able to communicate with the parents to make sure that any questions that they have in the process, those are getting answered. We've also had meetings both at the Del Kramer facility as well as at the schools themselves to meet with the parents to make sure everything in the document is understood to the extent that they feel like they want to know exactly what's going on, so that I can feel comfortable that they know what they're actually consenting to.
Thank you.
Yes?
Question for the gentleman from Hy-Line. What about gene editing? I imagine your restrictions are transgenic GMO work.
So,
work with CRISPR on any gene editing?
yeah, I know, like the gene editing, I guess that's part of the whole GMO of not adding any genetic material to the hens. We do, and I'm not a molecular geneticist, so maybe you can jump in, Jeffrey, if I'm saying it wrong. But we do have a molecular genetics laboratory, and we have all the research we're doing with the hens on our farms. We take blood samples, and we have a geneticist that her whole job is looking at the genome and then kind of looking at the selection process, which birds have these actual genes they've identified for egg production or disease resistance or different things. So she's doing that work, and then it all comes together in a database, and they try to see where they crisscross and how we can do the research with the molecular genetics, because that's really fast. You can have a drop of blood and with a baby chick and already have a kind of an idea what the genome is, what genes they carry. So it's really exciting, and Hy-Line's been doing that for now 20 years. So we have all that blood research. But again, as far as the gene editing and GMO research, we do not do any of that.
So
but it's interesting.
Just to make sure that I understand.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you track all of the genetic information, so you're storing the genetic information, and then you use that information for breeding purposes as opposed to editing an individual.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can you answer the question, what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, we haven't been able to figure that one out yet. So.
So you guys mentioned how it was kind of a struggle to work with the federal education unit in South Africa, but also that you had support from like you're in communications with the university, and I'm assuming you're working with churches and stuff. So what are kind of like things that aid you, like people that aid you, and then things that kind of hinder your work in South Africa?
So as somebody who's spent several months this summer working specifically with these organizations, I will say first and foremost, the thing that aids you is a right mindset. We serve best when we serve together, and everybody knows that when we go into the room. If you walk into a room and you tell somebody, I'm doing this for the children, and you can demonstrate that this is actually something that's benefiting the children, all of a sudden the Department of Education jumps on board real quick. All of a sudden the University of Enda, when you say this is benefiting your community, they jump on really quick. So that's first and foremost. They need to know your intentions. The things that are very hindering are the things that are hindering everywhere. People have other responsibilities. People have other priorities. When you're working with the Department of Education, specifically, first and foremost, their job is to show academic performance. The feeding is part of that, but is ancillary to that. And so recognizing that they have a priority that they need to meet as well, is certainly, it's a challenge because my priority is just feeding the kids. The same with the University of Enda. They have academic responsibilities. They have to be teaching. They have to be doing their other researches. They have to be providing assistance to their students that are trying to do research. So recognizing that they're just all over the place, those are the biggest hindrances. There's also a little bit of I've noticed a difference in culture, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. It's just something that one has to take into account. They are, more than I have experienced here, much more likely to say yes to something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have the time for it. And so that's been a bit of a challenge for me, is trying to navigate the cultural differences and understanding what they're actually going to be able to do. You know, they're not nefarious in any way, but recognizing their limitations and helping meet them where they are has definitely been a bit of a challenge. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else. You've been there for 22 years. So.
Yeah, the culture is you have. I learn about the culture even after 22 years.
Do you said you have support from other churches? Is that something you like? Do you have a lot of it, or?
We have built the ministry primarily as Christian missionaries, and so we have a lot of American church support, about 40 churches. And in Africa, the church is a big part of helping feed kids. Like in Cape Town, we have one group that has 140 churches that are working to feed children. And in Durban, there's 40 Methodist churches. The group in Cape Town were Baptist churches. We have a couple of hubs that are a group of Catholic churches. So the church support has been incredibly helpful to us.
I'm going to hand in the back over there first.
So I may have missed this earlier, but are you working on any value chains that starts with the chicken and ends with the egg locally with smallholder farmers so that they build out a value chain and they're the ones that are profiting and also providing local food?
Oh, absolutely. You know, that's one of the goals through all this collaboration is to empower the people in the community, and that's what our project in Mozambique, our company Versova, that's what we try to do in Mozambique is we have a central feed mill and we have a pullet growing system, but then we encourage and develop the community. We have educational programs for people that can come and learn how to do poultry themselves. And then we also have an Ebenezer training center in Mozambique. And we also have one in Zambia and Zimbabwe where we're teaching the community. They come in like once a month, and we'll have 100 to 200 farmers come in, and we spend a day or two with them, of getting them to the next step, that they too can be producers of their own food. You know, for us in America, we take so much for granted, and the people in Africa, when you go there, there's such a cultural change. It's unbelievable. They don't know how to do stuff, and it's hard for us to imagine that until you're actually there. But you know, they just need somebody there to teach them, and through the cultural changes between America in Africa and Europe and Africa, you got to go through that. Us in America, we want to do things so fast. We're on warp speed all the time. But when you go to third world countries in Africa and things slow down. Time doesn't mean anything to them. We look for retirement and being 70, 80 years old. Life expectancy in Africa is 40. They live for today. They don't think about a month or 2 months or a year down the road. So, but yeah, we're definitely out there as Versova trying to teach these people how to feed themselves.
We've actually started gardens in almost all of our 12 hubs and encouraging them to each have a poultry project as well. So learning to feed themselves is an important part of our vision.
My question was related to that the eggs that you're giving the children are grown in the South Africa and Mozambique then, and is what you're just answering, right? That's what you just said. And then is the idea to keep it as a small farm owner husbandry project, or is the plan to make it into something larger as we have here in the States?
I think it'll be both. Like if we're going to feed 100,000 kids an egg a day, we're going to have to go to a powdered egg product that we can transport around. But we also want to have many smallholder places producing chickens and eggs, and so taking advantage of mass production and local micro farming.
What format of cooking do the kids like to have their eggs? How do they like their eggs?
We haven't found a preference. We started out with just boiled eggs, and they love that. Where we will eventually go is probably more of a liquid or powdered egg product as we have, thousands of eggs. Right now, the Del Kramer Center was 200 eggs a day, and this other one was 70 eggs a day, and those are all boiled so far, and they love them. And they peel their own, and they help put the shells in the garden.
And I will say, from a methodological standpoint, it's a lot easier to standardize a hard-boiled egg than it is a plate of scrambled eggs. So.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Let's give our panelists a big round of applause.